Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Good morning. Still, whatever time of day it is, I'm not sure, given that time change. But have a good Sunday, everybody. And as you say, it's at one point in time, this would have been considered a gay holiday. It's the Oscars night, and people would be currently home getting their outfits together and their hors d'oeuvres and beverages and so forth. And people used to call it the gay Super Bowl. Now we've evolved, so the Super Bowl is the gay Super Bowl. And we have the gay Oscar nights. So things do change, and that's always a good thing. So what I want to talk about today is it possible to lead an ethical life that's also a joyous life? And just from that intro, and from those of you that know me, know that my answer to that is yes, it is possible, but that it's a choice. And very often, I think some of us forget to make that choice on a regular basis. So in case 23 of the Gateless Gate, or the Mumonkan, which is a book of koans, Patriarch Ino is speaking with a monk who has behaved badly or out of character, as they say. And the patriarch says to him, without good or evil, in this very moment, what is your original face? What is your original face? And I think that's a good question, even if at first you think, well, what is my original face? And in some interpretations, it says, before your mother and father were born, what is your original face? And so I think it's a good question to ask who we are, to really stop every once in a while and take a look at who we are as individuals, who we are as family, who we are as Sangha, and how did we get to where we are in this present moment. When I came to Buddhism, which is this year, 30 years ago, this year, I went to my first retreat, and I can't imagine how young I must have been when I went there. But I came to Buddhism as a man with a diagnosed anxiety disorder and a very active addiction to cocaine and alcohol. And later would discover that the other thing that was going on was that I had addiction to validation. My brain told me that I wasn't good enough, that I was not smart enough or whatever. And so I needed validation from you, because I figured if you liked me and I respected you, then maybe eventually whatever it was that you liked, I could figure that out and like myself. So that was a little bit of who stumbled through the door of the Zendo the first day that I went. And it was an interesting proposition. Mel Weitzman, who the former abbot at Harvard at Berkeley Zen Center, famously said, "No one shows up at the door of a Zen Center who's not broken in some way." And that wasn't a requirement to show up. It was just his experience of 50 years of being a teacher. So as I think about who I am and who we are, and as a Sangha and as a society, in the past year, I've been trying to stay away from watching the news or reading the news because it doesn't help me. And I don't think my ingesting all that information helps anybody else. And so that's one of the grounds for a moral life is the action that I'm taking beneficial to anyone, me or someone else? And it's not, so I've stopped. But I do occasionally read articles that someone forwards to me or that I find that I think will be helpful. And so this week, 3 people, and I'll have to figure out why, sent me an article by David Brooks in the New York Times. And the article was called How to Save a Sad, Lonely, Angry, and Mean Society. How to Save a Sad, Lonely, Angry, and Mean Society. And as I point out, 3 people sent that separately. So I had to have a moment like, what's up with that? In the beginning of his article, he puts it this way: I'd argue that we have become sad, lonely, angry, and mean as a society because so many people have not been taught or don't bother practicing to enter empathetically into the minds of their fellow human beings. And then he has another one of the David Brooks sentences: we're over politicized and growing increasingly under moralized, under spiritualized, and under cultured. And that's a lot of big fancy words for basically we're overly politicized, and I don't think any of us would argue with that wherever we might land on the spectrum. I also think that politics isn't just about who we elect. Politics is about a world in which what we like is somewhat determined by algorithms. The richest people in the world paid the smartest people in the world to come up with algorithms to not only discern what we like, but then to lead us to what they want us to like. And those economics are definitely political for me, and I hope for you. David's article goes on to talk about what he thinks one of the things is missing is that people aren't going to museums, and he gives some statistics that in America, attendance at museums, the opera, the symphony, and even theater is gone down, and regional theater gone down even more. And then he gives a statistic that in colleges and universities, many of them have closed or dismantled all their various humanities programs into a basic liberal arts curriculum that goes with the science and the technology and the engineering curriculums, because there's just not interest anymore. And he points out that we're in a movement right now, actually away from college education, that the idea is that we hear, oftentimes you hear somebody say, well, so-and-so never went to college and he owns a multi-billion-dollar company, or, and different words like that, or that there are ways to do brief targeted courses of learning, which will teach you that particular technology or engineering or finance skill that you need. And you don't have to be hanging around an expensive college for 4 years to get that. And what Brooks is arguing in his article is basically that when we consume culture, when we engage with or embody culture, our hearts and our minds expand. Our hearts and our minds expand. So that we start with a tiny circle of our own experience. And when we engage with culture, with history, reading history or reading novels or reading fiction and nonfiction, when we go to museums and look at paintings and so forth, that we have an opportunity to see a world outside our own. We all live in one country where clearly there are people that see things very differently than we do. And for some, those are in a different political party. For some, as we know, they're living in our houses or next door, or certainly gathering with us at holidays around the holiday table. And so what the suggestion here is that we pay close attention to history. And he gives this wonderful example that when he was teaching himself this idea, he went to a museum and I was not being careful because I didn't write down what museum it was, but to saw a Rembrandt painting. And it's one of Rembrandt's most famous paintings. It's called Return of the Prodigal Son. And what he talks about is that he'd seen pictures of it before, in magazines or other places. But when was at this museum taking a look at it, he said it was such a profound study because he was practicing this, getting into humanities, getting into the arts as a way of broadening my own life experience. And so what he says is that he painted this picture at the end of his life, Rembrandt, when popular taste had left him behind. His finances were in ruin, and his wife and 4 children had already passed away. And so David Brooks says, I'd seen renderings of this before, but not one in which the rebel son is as broken and fragile as he is in this particular picture. And he says the father reaches out and envelops the son with love that is patient, selfless, and forbearing. And that his 2 hands, one is strong and bold, and the other is differently designed so that one is masculine and protective, the other feminine and welcoming. And so that's sort of like the parable in the Mumonkan, right? Where it's who were you before you're where you are right now. Don't think about today. Don't think about yourself as good or bad or smart enough or not smart enough or fast enough or not fast enough. But who are you really? What are the values that you bring to the decisions that you make in life? What are the values that you carry with you as you put together your family of choice and and care for your family of origin? As you think about how you're going to interact with folks with whom you work or those whom you teach. And is this going to be simply interaction, or is it going to be an embodiment? So in this picture, he says we're simply witnessing an emotional moment, but the moment is about fracture and redemption. The moment is about fracture and redemption. And how many of us, just, you don't have to raise your hand, you can just smile, have had a fracture with another human being in the last 10 days? Yeah. So it's about fracture and redemption. And when I have a fracture with somebody, if I'm not in fit spiritual condition, if I'm not thinking ethically, as I've been taught as a Buddhist, when I have a fracture, it's like, what did you say? What did you do? And what on earth, who hurt you that caused you to do something so horrible? If I'm in good spiritual condition, I say, what happened? How did we miss each other? How did we not connect? And how do we end up saying things or doing things or just pulling away from each other in a way that isn't humane, that isn't Buddhist, that isn't who I want to be and who I think I am? And so I get a chance to say, wow, so this is bigger than me. And if I go look at this medieval painting, I can say, and you know what? I didn't invent this problem. So I don't have to get out the cat o' nine tails and whip myself like I just figured out how to say something mean to somebody who I love, or not catch when somebody says, I need some help today. I'm not feeling really good. I just need somebody to sit, you don't have to fix anything, just sit with me or walk with me. And how did I miss that? The English writer and critic John Ruskin says, the greatest thing a human soul does in this world is to see something and tell what you saw in a plain way. To slow down long enough. I've been reading a book, and I'll share a little bit if we have time later, but the book is called The Things You Can See Only When You Slow Down. The Things You Can See Only When You Slow Down. And it's one of those little books that you take with you on a train or Muni or somewhere. I'm not recommending anyone spend money on it just yet, but there's some good stuff in there. There's some fun stuff. I was looking at on the web, of course, as one does when one wants to think about the Buddha, and I looked up an article that was about neuroscience. And neuroscience has actually confirmed this idea that David Brooks is talking about. And it says that perception is not a simple and straightforward act, right? I don't see you, I don't listen to a conversation between you two or with me and just take that in. That what actually happens as the article put it, you don't open your eyes and ears and record the data that floods in the way an old camera light was recorded on film. Actually, what happens is perception, and it for us is a creative act. We take what's coming in and we filter it through every experience we've ever had. We filter it through every person we've ever encountered. We filter it through those people who were kind to us and to whom we were kind. And we filter it through, well, this one looks like somebody who was mean to me one time. And so we're filtering. It's a very creative process. And if we just let it happen, we all sort of know, as much as we would like it not to be the case, that when the human mind is at rest, our prefrontal cortex is about survival. So when the human mind is at rest, we tend to be looking for danger. We tend to be looking for things that are wrong or could go wrong. And our Buddhist practice and our practice for those people in recovery, the practice that we all have is to try and balance that out, to try to find the balance that says there are reasons for being afraid and being cautious and setting up boundaries. And there are reasons for being open and reaching out to help and letting other people help us. And that requires that we think bigger than my own experience. And so attention is a moral act. The way I look at it is a moral act. The key to becoming a better person, wrote Iris Murdoch, who's a poet and author, is to be able to cast just and loving attention on others. Just and loving. Not just loving, just and loving, both of those. And so she says that culture gives us a clue about how to do that. So in that picture, we've all heard the story of the prodigal son returning, but in that picture, when you look at it, it's not just a parable, it's not some verse from a Bible someplace, it's a picture of an old man who really looks sad, but there's a certain joy to him as he puts his hand on his son, two hands on his son, and he wants him to be back, and he wants him to be in the fold. Now there's also the other son standing nearby, and when you take a look at that picture, if you can look it up, take a look at what you think he's doing, because I have my interpretation of how happy he is to see his brother, but that's me, and that's where my mind goes, right? But I think the idea of taking this time to really look at culture, to look at art, to look at whatever your favorite picture is, and hopefully you're all bringing one to mind right now, your favorite portrait, modern art, or ancient art of some kind. But there are lessons to be learned. There are lessons when we say, I am not the first person that went away from my family because I didn't think they were healthy and good for me and stayed away for 2 decades and then went back when folks had gotten ill and it seemed that something was calling me to go back and mend the bridge that I thought quite justifiably been built to get me out of there, to keep me safe. And now it was time to rebuild that bridge. And it seemed daunting, and it seemed like maybe I'm not going to do this right, maybe I don't have the skills. And there are pictures throughout history of that particular parable of the prodigal son and others like it that says, you didn't invent this problem. You know, you did not invent this way of dealing with a complicated family to go 3,000 miles away to be safe. And you're not the first person to have told that story a lot as a way of justifying all sorts of errant behavior during the next 20 years. Like, if you had the life I had, you too would behave this way. So it's very helpful to go back and say, didn't invent any of that, I'm not original in that sense. What I get a chance to be is a bodhisattva, and to say, okay, so now I'm being still, I'm letting something arise to see what happens, and now I can go back and make different decisions and include my family and friends from those days in a different way. So I think in today's society, a lot of us are focused on getting the job done, of being productive, of having a certain goal and achieving that goal. Oftentimes in our careers, but also in our volunteer work and so forth. We don't think about why I'm doing something as much as we think about how to get it done and how fast can I get it done and that sort of thing. So I think the invitation here is, if we take a look at who we are as men identified folks today, we all are, I think, but as people, as we take a look at who we are as people, as Buddhas, as Bodhisattvas, we have another avenue to see deeply. So going to the galleries and looking at old movies and other forms of art, really good way to get a context for our lives. But we have what we did here in the first half hour of our time together today, which is to sit and be still, to just sit and be still. And all of the deadlines, hopefully, fly away for 30 minutes. All of the things that you wish you had accomplished by March of 2024 and haven't, they're at bay for 30 minutes at least. All of the things that you have on your to-do list that is way too long. I haven't seen it personally, but I guarantee you, if you have a to-do list, it's way too long. And it's our practice to let go for a brief period of all the drives and desires and expectations, the guilt and the shame that we have, and we sit in the present moment. We sit as our authentic self. The idea of meditation, the idea of Zazen, is to return to your Buddha nature, to return to your original self. And the Buddha himself, spoke of trusting the innate nobility of each being. So, if we think we're not doing something right, if we think we're going too slow, if we think we're not meeting our parents or our friends or our boss's expectation, for those 30 minutes, one of my teachers, original teachers, said, you don't think you're doing anything in your 30 minutes of meditation or your hour or whatever it was, because you should be accomplishing all those other things. He said, let me tell you on behalf of the entire world that if you are sitting quietly for 30 minutes, you are not causing conflict or drama in the world. And on behalf of the world, I thank you. That's a gift. That is a gift that I gave and that all of us gave this morning. So thank you for that gift. So while we're sitting, we come here on Sundays to sit with the GBF because this is a Sangha that has meaning for us. So in this Sangha, I sit as the original Stephen with my Buddha nature. You all sit with your original Buddha natures, and we sit as a Sangha with our Buddha nature. And when this organization came together, we had a lot of reasons about survival and about being invisible inside larger spiritual organizations, including Buddhism. And so a lot of very important loving happened here, a lot of very important redefinition happened here. And so we had an opportunity to say, Buddhism and being gay, two things that go together. It's not one, it's not the other, they go together. And by our level of acceptance, for each other and ourselves in face of monumental odds for many of us as kids growing up or as adults in the workplace, we said, here it's okay. Here it's okay. It is not just that we happen to be gay and we happen to be Buddhists, it's that we're gay Buddhists and we're fellows. It's a fellowship. So we've got this figured out, and you know what? The rest of Buddhism, you can learn a whole bunch of stuff from us. You know, we've got some lessons to teach you. But I think for me, some of the stuff that's really important is that we have this practice. And I had this practice and a lot of therapy and so forth. And then I learned something that's unique in the Bodhisattva vows that we take. Unique in the Bodhisattva vows, which says, I will live and be lived for the benefit of all beings. Well, now, if any of you have any slight touch of codependence, you know that sentence alone could keep us busy for the rest of our time. It's like, for all beings. Ooh, I have a very long list of beings out there. Probably a few in here that need my attention today. But what I learned was that there's an easier way to do that, a simpler way, and ways in the teachings, in the sutras of the Buddha. Which are old stories, in the koans of the Buddha, which are old riddles, if you will, that give us a chance to get rid of our fixed views and to think differently. And so what I learned is that I don't make decisions for me anymore. Dogen said, and my teachers hammered into me for the many years when I was learning, you'll know when you have begun to experience bodhisattva vows, when bodhicitta has arisen and you're in touch with and embodying your Buddha nature, you'll know that that's happening when you no longer make I decisions, you make we decisions. And I again thought, oh man, that sounds codependent to me. What do you mean, no I decisions? I've got to get dinner. Back in those days, I had to get 2 dinners. I had to get a whole bunch of things going on. I had to, I had all my plans. And what the teachers explained to me and the teachings of the Buddha explained to us is, yeah, that's right. That's right. You do have to take responsibility for your life. But now when I make a decision, if I'm going to travel, if I'm going to take on some volunteer work, if I'm going to go have dinner with somebody or not have dinner with somebody, the issue is, so I'm making that decision, but how does that impact the other people? How does that impact the community in which I live and the globe on which I find myself, the planet? And so I make a decision that says, I will do this, but I make that decision with at least, when I'm in good fit spiritual condition, I make that decision with a real sense of what is the intention of that action, and then what is the impact of that action. It can be 2 different things. And so, we find ourselves, if we think somebody we know is not doing well physically, emotionally, spiritually, hopefully we reach out. And there couldn't be anything wrong with that, right? So, we reach out and do something for that person. And you say, well, that's got to be good. But then you take a look at that, and I don't know about you, but there have been times when I've done some volunteer work or reached out to somebody because I hadn't done anything else useful in a week. And this would make me feel like I was in fact a Buddhist, or I was in fact a human person. And so better to do it than not do it, I suppose. But the idea is to learn. There was a posting on Facebook this week that somebody put up. And I think it was a picture of Oscar Wilde. I'm not sure who the person was, but on top of it, it said, I completed a project today in 12 minutes that I have put off for 18 months. And underneath it, it said, I have learned nothing from this experience. And I think that that's so often the case that as we do things, these are opportunities, which is why having a connection with humanities and not just technology, with the arts and not just the science is so important to us. And for us as Buddhists to return over and over again to the opportunity, the invitation of the Buddha, to do ethical, behave in ethical fashions, to live up to our Bodhisattva vows. In Lion's Roar, they put it this way: we are no longer intent on creating comfort for ourselves, we work with others. This implies working with our other as well as with the other other. Our other is our projections of our sense of privacy and longing to make things comfortable for ourselves. The other is the phenomenal outside world, which is filled with screaming kids, dirty dishes, and confused spiritual practitioners, and assorted other wonderful sentient beings. So the message there is that we get this opportunity, and the very simple sentence that teacher shared with me, you'll know you've begun to arouse bodhicitta, your loving heart, when you don't make any I decisions, you make all decisions we. What is the impact? How do we do this? So Thich Nhat Hanh puts it this way: we care for others begins and ends with care for yourself. So I'm still allowed to make decisions. I'm still allowed to apply for the next good job that comes up. And included in that is if my friend Tommy says, "Oh, I applied for that same job," there's a part of me that's going to say, "Well, I hope I get that good job," which the implication is, I hope you don't get it. I bought a lottery ticket this week because it's $697 million. And I bought it, and there were 3 people in line behind me, and I thought, I have a thing with lottery tickets. I don't even match a single number, never mind win. So it's some sort of a miracle to get me to stop buying them. It hasn't worked yet. But, I'm allowed to have that thought that I hope I win, because I'll do some good with this in addition to the small cottage I built in Ireland. So we're still allowed to have those kind of thoughts, right? And as Thich Nhat Hanh says, it begins and ends with care for the self. So we do have to take care of ourselves, and that's not forbidden. That's not, Audre Lorde says that self-care is not selfish, it's an act of revolution. So the Buddha, in one of his teachings, says that looking after oneself, one looks after others, and looking after others, one looks after the self. In the teaching that I found that talks about this was really quite wonderful. It's the Buddha is giving a talk, and he's talking about an acrobat, and the Buddha as an acrobat. And this acrobat is sitting on a tall bamboo pole, and he invites his assistant to climb up on his shoulders. And the young man says, "You're sitting on a bamboo pole, and you want me to climb on your shoulders?" That I'm sure we're all having a vision right now that's not pleasant. And so the guy says, he says, "What do I do?" And the master says, "You look after me, and I'll look after you." And as the young assistant climbs up the pole, he says, No, master, that's not it. I'm going to look after me, and you look after you. That'll be safer." And the Buddha or the master, the acrobat, says, nope. He says, "I will look after myself, and so should you, and you should look after yourself, and so will I." So we practice the establishment of mindfulness by saying, by looking after me, I'm looking after you. By looking after yourself, you're looking after me. So it's not either or. It cannot be me today and you on Thursday, which is my volunteer day, or me today and you guys on Sunday when it's my Buddhist day. It has to be a vow. I heard someone say this week that they think of the vow to live for the benefit of all beings as a zip code. It's just where I live. I don't get to come and go. I do, going for this zip code. But if you think of it just as a metaphor, it's a zip code. I live here. So that vow to always be about the care and concern for others is a really simple one. And then I think the results are pretty awesome. So how do we do this? And the simple thing is we do it by meditation. We get quiet and we allow ourselves to just let all of the desires and all of the things we got to do and the nagging and which is ourself and others, we just let that slip away a little bit. And then we arouse mindfulness. Suzuki Roshi used to say, when you sit, meditation, that's good, it's important. But when you arise from that cushion or these chairs, the important thing is to take the mind of Zazen with you into the rest of your life. So that moment when you said, you folks have heard me say before that while I'm meditating and my mind wanders, I always say, not now. Whatever thought comes up, and they do come up, a lot of them, I say, not now. And that's really helpful to me. Well, the same thing when I leave here and somebody dashes up to me and says, "Can we meet on Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock? And I get to say, in the old days, I would have said yes, and then spent time jiggling around the other 3 people I said yes to for Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock. And now I say, let's check. I would love to get together with you. Let's figure out when the best time is. And so that's honoring that person by saying, yes, I want to get together with you. But also honoring myself in reality, which is, I don't know. I'm 72 years old. I'm not sure where I'm going. Well, I know where I'll be this evening, but I'm not sure where I'm going this afternoon because I can't remember. And so it's just honoring that reality and saying, why have somebody write that in their schedule if it might not turn out to be true? Little simple ways. So in taking the Bodhisattva vow, we acknowledge that we're not going to be instigators. This is my favorite sentence from that teaching. We're not going to be instigators of any further chaos or misery in the world. We're not going to be instigators. It doesn't mean we won't accidentally turn up a little of it, or we won't accidentally run headlong into some of it. But that Bodhisattva vow says, if I think about everybody else before I speak or act, if I think about everybody else before I speak or act, I won't be the instigator of chaos and misery. I'll deal with it as it comes up as a loving bodhisattva, but I won't be the instigators. And in fact, Thich Nhat Hanh says we are going to be liberators. As bodhisattvas, we're inspired to work on ourselves as well as with other people. So this is ethical living is called Śīla in Buddhist practice, and as we know, Śīla is the three pieces of the Eightfold Path that have to do with right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So these are real opportunities for us, and we think, well, I can't lead a fully ethical life. I'm busy, and plus that those people are running for president, and the world is chaotic, and how can I possibly create change? And it's really simple for us because it's those three. Śīla is right speech, right action, and right livelihood. What do I say? Can I take a moment, to pause? The famous old saying, between stimulus and response, there's pause. Viktor Frankl. And in that pause is where we create change. So can I just put everything in the draft folder before I hit send on the computer and up here? Before I dash off and get all engaged in some sorts of action, whatever that might be, can I stop long enough, Thich Nhat Hanh says 3 deep breaths, long enough to say, what am I about to do? And for me, it's often in the category of wanting to help somebody. It's taken me 30 years of Buddhism and 28 years of recovery to get to the point where it's like figuring out that doing something with somebody, for somebody, being fully present does not mean fix. Nobody has recently or ever called me up and said, could you fix me? But I can't tell you how many times I heard that request. When somebody said, can we go for a walk, or can we get together? And I thought, oh, good, here's something I can fix this up, and then I'll feel really good because I fixed it up. And the fact is, what people want more than anything else is just for us to be fully present. And the action is just to show up. To show up, and Thich Nhat Hanh always says, show up and smile. Just let people know. I'm not going to ask you to say anything that you're not ready to say. You don't have to tell me what happened and all the details, which is normal human reaction, right? Somebody says, I'm just really down today. Can you come by? And you come to the house and they say, well, someone broke up with me. And you say, oh, well, what happened? Da, da, da. Recently had a death in my spiritual circle, somebody who died by suicide. And I cannot tell you the number of people that came to be with me. The person was not that close. Many other people were more in need of care around that than I was. But the people that came to me, very nice that they wanted to offer their condolences, and they're really, and then they started. It's a stunning number of people who said, how did it happen? What was the means? Blah, blah, blah. Was there a note? What did it say? And I said to each of them, kindness, thank you for being present with me. Let's go for a walk, let's do whatever. But you don't need to try and fix me, because in this situation, I'm not impacted that way. I was impacted by the fact that somebody who had been a Buddhist for 40 years and in recovery for 28 years, actually, the same as mine, made that decision. I respect a person's right to make that decision if they do, but I don't like it. And so that's, to me, it was like, how could you be in those two places and not be connected? But nobody asked me about that. People said, how did it happen? And they wanted to, blow by blow, if you will. And I just thought, oh, and like looking at an old painting, I looked into the mirror of my being and said, how many times have I asked some version of that? Somebody said I'd broken up, or my mother died, or whatever it was that happened, and I, instead of coming over with some tea or something, I came with a head full of questions and ways to answer those questions and then fix whatever was going on. So I think it's important for us, this idea of living a life that's ethical and to still have fun. There's a Bodhisattva prayer for humanity that you probably all know from reciting it here and other places, but I'll just share it. It's very brief. May I be a guard for those who need protection, a guide for those on the path, a boat, a raft, a bridge for those who wish to cross the flood. May I be a lamp in the darkness, a resting place for the weary, a healing medicine for those who are sick. May I be a vase of plenty, a tree of miracles. And for the boundless multitude of living beings, may I bring sustenance and awakening, enduring like the sky, earth and sky, until all beings are freed from sorrow and all beings are awakened. And as we know in our Buddhist practice, that's for Soto Zen folks, we are not looking to get awakened until we can turn around with the Bodhisattva vows and help everyone to be awakened. And most lineages have some version of that. But it's a very different thing than racing to the finish line to get into heaven, or not doing certain things, or doing penance for certain things so that you get your slate clean so you can get into heaven. And it really is the call to do things for each other. So I just want to say that I think it's very possible for that not to be much fun if that's, we get all tied up in that sort of thing. And so I just want to read one more case koan for you. That's it's probably my favorite koan of all. And this one is called Case 74 in the Blue Cliff Records. Every day at midday, Master Jinyu personally manned the rice bucket, and standing before his somber sangha, he broke into dance, whooping and laughing, and he would say, "Little bodhisattvas, come and eat this rice." So Zendao said, although he acted this way, Jinyu was not a good person. And a senior monk called Changping said, the old man taught, "Little bodhisattvas, come and eat this rice. What did it mean?" And the answer was, it seems he was extolling that meal as an occasion for joy. And so I think as we take seriously our ability to improve our own lives by being better connected, somebody who's not here today but who taught me a little something earlier this year, he said his 3 vows for this year were to be present, to be pleasant, and to be connected. And so when he did his assessment in the morning and at night, he said, how did I do? Did I do things today that allowed me to be more present to folks, that allowed me to be more pleasant, and that allowed me to increase the amount of connection, meaningful, real, non-demanding connection that I have with other people. And so that's a pretty simple way to reflect at the end of the day. When I do my meditation, I say, how did I do today? What can I do differently tomorrow, or more of tomorrow, or less of tomorrow? And that just really, I think, gives us a real opportunity to think about how we live our lives in an ethical fashion. Are we living for the benefit of others? And the question is that simple. And I think I have another 2 minutes, so I'm going to share with you a couple lines from a poem called The Invitation by Araya Mountain Dreamer, a Canadian poet. And it says, it doesn't matter to me what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for, and if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's longing. I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving to hide it or fade it or fix it. I want to know if you can be with joy, mine and your own. If you can dance with wildness and let the ecstasy fill you to the tips of your fingers and toes without cautioning us to be careful or realistic, without remembering our limitations of being human. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours and mine, and still stand at the edge of the lake and shout to the sliver of the full moon, yes, just yes. It doesn't interest me where or what or with whom you have studied. I want to know what sustains you from the inside when all else fails. And I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company you keep in those empty moments. So I think beings are numberless. I vow to serve them is a good way to begin, right? Beings are numberless. I vow to live and be lived for the benefit of all beings. And that includes all of you. Thank you. So we have a little time for questions and comments, if anybody, disagreements, whatever you'd like. Or we could all go out to lunch. Any hands over there? Oh, yes.
I have so many questions, but thank you. You just brought new meaning to a whole lot of things I thought I knew. Like, what is, Joseph Wilson said once,
How's your what?
Śīla, how's your purity? It's the literal definition. How are your ethics? The other one is, what's your original face? I understood that really before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, original face. Who were you? Who are you originally before you start making all the decisions about surviving today, surviving tomorrow, regretting yesterday, wishing you had done things differently? Who are you really? And how are you making the decisions to hold something as guilt or shame? And can you let it go? Yeah. Ethical behavior. If I'm worried about that stuff that I did yesterday or did the day before, and worried about the things I need to do on my to-do list, that, endless to-do list, then I'm not paying attention to you. And I bet we all can have remember experiences where we've been out to dinner with one person, one friend, or a family member, and they're talking about something, and you suddenly tune back in because you just finished the last 2 paragraphs of your Dharma talk for next Sunday. It's like, okay, fully present. And that's where the meditation part, because it's like fully present means just us. And we learn in our half hour of meditation and other times we sit meditation how to do that, how to just now. And that's when we take that mind to everything else we do. It is a practice. That's why we call it the practice of Buddhism. But that's our opportunity. The invitation is to slow down. That's this wonderful little book. Only the things you can see only when you slow down. So, there you go. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay. Well, then I will read you a little bit of what she says in the shir. I don't know who it is. Heyman Sunim. I should have done a little research to find out. He, I think. They. There we go. Problem solved. What they said. The epilogue is called Your Original Face. When you are so busy that you feel perpetually chased, when worrying thoughts circle your head, when the future seems dark and uncertain, when you are hurt by what someone has said, slow down, even if only for a moment. Bring all of your awareness into the present and take a deep breath. What do you hear? What does your body feel? What does the sky look like? Only when we slow down can we finally see clearly our relationships, our thoughts, and our pain. As we slow down, we are no longer tangled in them. We can step out and appreciate them for what they are. The faces of our family and colleagues who always help us, the scenery that we pass by every day without noticing, our friends' stories that we fail to pay attention to, in the stillness of the pause, the entirety of our being is quietly revealed. Befriend the silent observer. Find out where it is and what shape it has assumed. Do not try to imagine it to be something you already know. Let all your thoughts and images merge back into silence and just sense and observe already that there is silence. If you see the face of the silent observer, then you have found your original face from before you were born. So it's really the invitation today in that book and in what I was trying to share with you is just the awesome invitation and power of being centered and silent and being fully present for who's ever with you. And that starts with if you're with yourself. So there it is. Now we'll have some announcements.